Welcome back to the Dialed In Podcast. I'm Mo, and I'm here with Gene, who's in LA today. I'm in New York. Gene, what's going on, man?
This guy has COVID.
Worst. Dude, that's commitment to the pod. Thanks for getting on and recording. How you feeling, bud?
I'm feeling pretty decent overall, but yeah, commitment.
Well, what do you got on your on that sick wrist today?
Well, my sick wrist is for travel. So I've got the old reliable Pepsi GMT, and yeah, it's a good reminder of being away from home and just having the ability to check time in both places.
That's a white gold one.
That's correct, with the blue dial. So a little bit different, a little if you know, you know, but one of my favorites and definitely something that I like to wear when I'm traveling. What about you?
So I got on the new Ingenieur 42 millimeter in black ceramic,
Nice.
which I've just been loving. I never knew if I'd be like a blacked out watch kind of guy.
It's so sleek.
It's super sleek. It definitely goes with like my aesthetic, which is typically I'm wearing all black.
Yeah, which is why I'm actually surprised that you didn't consider yourself to be a sort of like murdered out or blacked out watch guy.
Yeah, I guess I always thought, I like a watch sort of standing on its own and being the one thing, if you will, that's kind of pops out on the outfit. But this has totally changed my opinion. The ceramic is super light, and yeah, I love it on my wrist. Actually, kind of cool. I actually got invited by IWC this coming week to see a screening of the F1 movie and like see some of their new releases, which will be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll have to give us a review next time.
For sure, on next week's pod. Stay tuned. So we got a lot of topics today, bud, to talk about. We're talking Grail Watches, a little bit about like our experience with Rolex ADs and what that process looks like. Wanted to get your thoughts also on people who spend an absurd amount of money on the secondary market to buy Rolex new releases. Just to be like the first ones that wear it. I always find that weird, so I wanted to chat a bit about that and a lot more. So as always, no barrier to entry here on the Dialed In Pod, just a love for watches. And with that, Gene, let's get dialed in. First off, I wanted to actually say, Gene, a big thank you to you for sharing that story about your father last week. People really loved that, and some even reached out to tell us that. It's like a super special moment between you and your dad. And, I think I'm grateful, and I'm sure our listeners are grateful that you chose to share that with us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it just is a testament to the idea of watches being, something that we can carry over and hand down and in the reverse, right? And they're signifiers of success. We talk about watches as, milestones in certain cases. And I think it was certainly a signal of that in my case. So happy to share that story.
Yeah, awesome. Blancpain, dude. We talked about Blancpain last week, and we spoke about it because they just released these two 38 millimeter 50 fathoms, and by the time of that recording, when we were recording, they'd only released those two sort of shrink it and pink it models, if you will. They were definitely sort of targeted towards the female market. They had like mother of pearl dials. One, as we both said, kind of looked like a toy, looked like the Scuba 50 Fathoms, the Swatch collab. But since the last pod has come out, actually the day before it came out, on the Tuesday of this past week, Blancpain released a whole lineup of additional 38 millimeter models. And I would say that these actually really do give collectors and enthusiasts like what we've all been looking for out of a smaller 50 Fathoms. So these 38 millimeter versions are now 12 millimeters thick versus the 14.2 millimeters of thickness in the larger models, which is a really substantial difference and noticeable on the wrist, I'd imagine. They also come in steel, titanium, and red gold. There's two dials, black or blue, and you have sailcloth, NATO, or tropic rubber straps that can be had on each of those models, and then steel and titanium bracelets available for both those steel and titanium cases. And those are about $2,800 premium for the steel bracelet and about a $3,200 premium for the titanium bracelet. The pricing
the pricing is crazy.
It totally misses the mark, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the baseline pricing is, but you're looking at somewhere in the high teens to early 20s. You know, the counterpart here is the Rolex Submariner. And if you look at the pricing between the two, it's just, I don't know, I can't explain it.
I 100% agree. It's just for everyone's sort of edification. The cheapest model here of this 38 millimeters is the steel on a strap with a pin buckle versus a deployant. And that's at about 16,700. So that's the baseline. And then if you go to full steel on bracelet, you're at 19,500. Titanium on a bracelet, 21,100. Mm-hmm. And of course, it goes up with the red gold on the strap and stuff. But I think let's focus on the steel ones here. I think you're 100% right to compare it to the Submariner. And like, let's just take $20K for the steel 50 fathoms on bracelet. Yeah. There were so many other pieces I would go for with $20K in my pocket instead of this 50 fathoms, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can, just for reference, you can get steel GMTs on the secondary market, new unworn, at, you know, under 20K. You can get two-tone Daytonas under 20K. I mean, you can get Longa Saxonias in precious metal. You can get vintage Patek Calatravas. I know these aren't dive watches, but like just the universe of watches when you get to the 20K mark mm-hmm. is way intense competition there. And what Blancpain's saying, which I agree with or I don't know if I agree with, but I at least understand their sort of desire to command a premium and sort of make their brand a premium over a Rolex, for example. But is it really double the value of a Submariner, which retails for $9,500?
No. I mean, the short answer is just no.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay. So that, I don't even know what to say. Like they've really, you blew it. You blew it. You know, what's interesting is someone reached out on DM, you know, one of our listeners, to talk about what he thinks. You know, we were kind of debating what we think the price should be. And so, you know, I was saying that I think 12,500, had they priced it there, would have been kind of the sweet spot for me, at least. Just, again, you establish that premium on the Rolex Submariner, and Rolex is a brand. But you maintain some sort of reality as to what the rest of the market is, right, for dive watches, and for nice dive watches at that. And it would just, like, I guess we can figure out where this settles in the secondary market, you know, a year from now, as to what the market's willing to pay. The listener that had reached out thought that it was going to settle somewhere around 10 to 12. I kind of think it's going to settle somewhere around 15. I don't think it'll be the most popular watch, but listen, I could be wrong. What do you think there?
Yeah, I think 15 is probably where it lands. It's probably not going to be the most popular watch, just given some of the alternatives there. And to your point, you know, if you've got 20 grand, there are probably other options for you that you would most likely find more desirable under the circumstances. But yeah, I just think it's a miss. It's a miss when, you know, it was so attainable to get a win.
Right.
You know, it's something that people have wanted for a very, very long time. But the price point isn't right.
Totally. Gene, I want you to go off on a Christopher Ward release that you had texted me about.
Well, it's actually a good counterpoint, right? Because we're talking about divers. And Christopher Ward just released the C60 Trident Reef. You know, we'll probably talk a little bit more about summer watches later, but, you know, given the color combinations, a lot of really fun and bright colors. You know, of course, they didn't miss turquoise. But at sub $1,000, right? So I think the price point here is somewhere around $850. You're talking about 200 meters of water resistance, a diver that is totally usable if you actually want to dive. It has a lot of the bells and whistles that you'll see for much more at a much higher price point. And I think they just kind of nailed it. The timing was perfect, and it's the right watch at the right price at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, I had missed this release until you texted me, but I did scroll through the website and write an article on it, and they look fun. You know, they're just like fun colors and cool for the summertime. I know next week we're going to try and do a segment on summer watches, so again, stay tuned. And one other note, by the way, that to everyone listening, all the watches we're talking about today are going to be linked in the show notes. So go over there and take a peek while you're listening. And Yeah, I love this C60 Trident Reef. Like, I think it's a cool watch. I don't know. Would you go buy it, Gene? Do you own a Christopher Ward?
I don't own a Christopher Ward. I've thought about a couple of different, references that they have. I find the moon phase that they've got with that aventurine dial to be super attractive. And I also think the most recent release outside of the C60, which was the, I think, C12 Loco, is pretty interesting as well. But, look, at $850, the C60 Trident Reef is just the type of watch and the right price point where I could totally and conceivably buy it for the summer and set it down, the other 9 months of the year and wear it again next summer. So I think they just nailed it. I don't know that I'd buy one, but I could see myself doing so at that price point. I don't love any of the colorways that they've got, but if something really did jump out at me, and maybe there'll be some additional colorways coming up, definitely a possibility. What about you?
100% the exact same answer. I could have said it better myself with the idea of like just the price point, being able to buy it for, to only wear for 3 months, and then pick it up next year. I would feel uncomfortable, making a buying decision like that on a 10, 15, certainly 20K watch, and above. But, and even, let's be honest, even like a $5,000 watch, right? If you're going to pay $5,000 for something, you want to get a ton of wear out of it. And so you nailed it, sub $1,000. It's not cheap, but it is definitely at a price point where it makes sense to buy it for a very specific purpose, have some fun with it on a beach and by a pool and whatever. And then revisit it the following year. So
Absolutely.
yeah, the next release I wanted to talk about is something actually that we're recording this on Sunday, and this was released or at least announced yesterday on Saturday. The LeBron James collabed Richard Mille. It's a split-second chronograph. I believe it's the RM6501.
That's right.
Carbon TPT case. It's got some interesting colors, which why don't you take it away from here, Gene, and tell us about what you think of that watch and maybe some of the details.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really interesting about this particular reference is the fact that there are so many personal details to LeBron that are visible on the timepiece. We were talking about this a bit earlier, and the truth is if I look back at some of the other collaborations, and we talked briefly about the Bubba Watson, a few other watches in past episodes, there are very few that have the amount of personal details in their special editions as this one does, inclusive of LeBron's actual LJ logo. And to your point about colors, it has the purple and sort of gold or yellow that represent Laker colors, and there are some accents of green, which I suspect are a throwback or a callback to his high school, which is St. Vincent St. Mary in Akron. But definitely a call out to his history and also just, again, the very personal details to it. What do you think of it?
I think of it the same way I think of 99% of Richard Mille's catalogs. It looks weird, not something that I would want on my wrist. It looks like kind of looks like a toy. I'm always in awe of the sort of craftsmanship and technology that goes into it. But beyond that, I have no interest in ever having that on my wrist. Not that I would ever be allocated it. I think it's only 250 pieces, but no, I have no interest. What about you?
Yeah, same. I'd read 150 pieces, but either way, 150 or 250. Extremely limited in either case. But I'll be honest. If I had the money to buy it, and if I was on the list to actually be able to purchase it, if I had the allocation, I don't know that I would outside of just the opportunity to flip it, but not something that I would ever seek. Definitely not on the secondary market, and probably not even if I was allocated. So yeah, I agree with you.
It also has his. I'm just taking a look at some pictures here. It also has his signature on the back of the case back. Like it's a exhibition case back with his signature on it, which to me is completely illegible. I could not tell that's LeBron James' signature. But
this level of detail and personalization is something that I've seen with AP, certainly with Travis Scott. but not to this level with Richard Mille so far. So this is an interesting kind of step forward for them, I think. But correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. And I would say maybe Ferrari, but I think that was done very, very well, both from a colorway perspective and even having a Ferrari logo somewhere on there. This is actually their first foray into like the NBA. So it'll be interesting to see if that carries through, or it's just sort of LeBron James is the exception. Mm-hmm. Who would you pick as the next sort of collab within the NBA?
I think there was a Talking Watches with Karl Anthony Towns. So I know you're a huge Knicks fan. But I don't think he's gotten to that level. Truth be told, I think LeBron is he's sort of transcended just his position as being an NBA player. I don't know that there's anyone else that I can think of immediately that feels like the right fit here outside of, I don't know, someone like Michael Jordan or something like that. Mm-hmm. But
you don't think Steph Curry's reached that height?
As a watch influencer, though? No.
Yeah.
No.
All right. Well, I guess we'll all stay tuned and see what happens. See what happens there. Moving on to out of releases and into some of the stuff I wanted to talk about today. We talked about this on our first episode, actually. So longtime listeners, what's up? We're back again with this topic. But Grail Watches.
Yeah.
One, I want to know what are some of your, or I guess, I don't know. Let's define Grail Watch, because people have multiple Grail watches, and just by definition of Grail, that is sort of counterintuitive. And then two, like we'll name some of the Grail watches, and three, are they even really a thing? And does it make sense to have the statement of like, this is my Grail watch? And would you be able to sort of stop ever desiring a watch or ever wanting to go buy another watch if you obtain one of these ones on your list? So let's start first. Like, what do you think a Grail watch is?
Well, I've traditionally thought of a Grail watch as being, kind of end game. It's the idea that it's the watch that will, kind of be the statement piece and possibly the end of your collection journey. And truth be told, I don't think that exists. I think we've both done this long enough to know that there are watches that we really care about, that we would definitely love to have in our collection, might even represent a permanent part of our collection. But I don't think the watch collecting journey, ends with a very specific watch. I've just been through too many cases of even watches that I've loved, that I've purchased, that have fallen out of favor within, a couple of years or something like that, or just wearing it on the wrist. It doesn't look quite as great as I thought it would, or maybe the use case to wear it isn't, it doesn't happen often enough. But I don't think a Grail watch, as it's generally framed as being, kind of the end all be all, actually exists. But how do you feel about that?
Completely agree, man. I can tell you, I always call the Nautilus 5740G the perpetual calendar in white gold. One of my Grails, the 5970P Patek, it's the Lemania-based perpetual calendar chronograph. Of course, the Audemars Piguet perpetual Royal Oak, the new sort of John Mayer edition that came out. That is, I call it ultimate Grail watch, end game watch. I would only ever need that watch ever again in my collection. But in reality, like you get it, and that'll be amazing, great. Something great in life has happened if one of those watches fall into my possession. We're into this passion hobby, because we love watches, right? Like multiple watches. And we love like just a lot of things that go into watchmaking, watch marketing, the aesthetics of it, the way a watch makes you feel, the way you can sort of wax poetic for hours about these time-telling pieces on your wrist. Nothing about that says that one watch would ever satisfy that itch, right? Like just by virtue of how we treat watches as sort of these romantic objects, I think it's impossible to say that one would satisfy all of that.
Completely, 100%.
What are some of your Grails?
Well, you named a couple, actually. I think the John Mayer AP is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. The 5740 Patek is an amazing, watch. Outside of that, a watch that I've thought quite a bit about is the Journe Chronomètre Blue. I know a lot of people have that as kind of their Grail watch. It's funny because it's technically, sort of a lower end piece for Journe, but I think that blue dial is stunningly beautiful. Another watch that I've been thinking about a bit lately, and probably not a Grail, but something that I definitely want is the Reverso, the JLC Reverso in the pink gold with the Milanese bracelet that they just announced at Watches and Wonders this year. Probably a Rolex Daytona Le Mans.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, that's the other problem is there's just so many. And truth be told, again, that there's always going to be new watches. And there's always going to be something that catches your eye at some point in a way that it's going to feel emotionally like a Grail. But I don't think the concept truly exists as it is currently understood, again, as an end game or something that just completely shuts down the hobby for you.
Yep. I think we're completely aligned there. I like the thought of it, though. I do tell myself that if that John Mayer Royal Oak Perpetual landed in my hands, that would be it for me. So it's nice to dream about that, but in reality, just not the case. Listen, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about. I saw that the Land Dweller has hit the market. Okay, so some normal person has been allocated a Land Dweller at their Rolex AD and does what everyone does when they get them first, which is immediately flip it. And so on the secondary market, again, this is just asking price. I don't have any confirmation that it's sold at this price, but the asking price I saw was about $90,000 for a watch that retails for roughly $16,000. That is absurd. This always happens with Rolex new models and new releases every year. As soon as they initially hit the market and then therefore the secondary market, they're priced at these like insane levels, and people actually buy them, right? And so I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on like this concept of having to own something first, right? And it's not a knock on people who purchase watches on the secondary market and therefore like Rolex is above retail. If you don't want to play the AD game, like God bless, more power to you. Go buy whatever the hell you want to buy and spend your money on it, right? But I guess the crux of it is like, okay, the Rolex Daytona, the steel Panda Daytona is kind of leveled out at roughly like $30K, maybe a little less these days, but somewhere between $28 and $30K for a new unworn version.
Right.
That is double retail, but that is what the market commands. The Land Dweller is no way landing and stabilizing at $90K on the secondary market.
Right.
So what's the psychology behind buying and spending this amount of money that you're paying above what eventual market demand will be?
Look, I'd like to think that I'm a reformed sneakerhead. And so there's part of me that understands the psychology and the dynamics of exclusivity and wanting to have something first and being able to wear something and be seen as the first person or one of the first people to have it. I think that's what's happening here, but at a totally and wildly different scale. 90K is completely absurd. There's just... Look, at that point, you've just got money to burn. But the truth is that if your watch collecting has gotten to a place where your sole desire is just to have something first, to be able to wear it out in public and publish it on Instagram or TikTok or your social media so that everyone can see that you are the first person to have this particular reference, that's just not how I'm wired. I to be honest, while I sort of understand the dynamic, I'm completely removed from it, and I would never do that. But, I suppose if you've just got the money to spend, maybe it's something that you might want to do. But, again, I'm not wired that way, certainly not anymore. But I don't know how you feel about it. I'm lost with it, and just seeing how these prices are going for a lot of the new releases from Watches and Wonders, the premium that they're going for at the moment, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I completely aligned. It's 100% crazy. And just so before we get a bunch of people in the comments sort of correcting me, I actually can't find that $90,000 listing anymore. I did find a $75,000 listing for the 40 millimeter steel land dweller, which is still crazy and absurd.
Exactly.
And, at that point, it's pretty much the same thing as 90,000. I do also see that the rose gold land dweller 40 millimeter is selling for 130,000, which is just.
Just get something else at that point.
Totally. I mean, the amount of watches I'd buy at 130,000, you can buy perpetual calendar Royal Oaks, like we were just talking about, not the John Mayer, but really, really solid, or open works, or there's tons of things you can spend $130,000 on the secondary market. So I don't understand it, and I kind of wanted to use this as a way to also talk about sort of our experience with Rolex and just their sort of AD system and how it's working. And the reason I bring that up is because, you and I always talk about, one, we share an AD in New York. We do have, I think you have actually two Rolex ADs in New York that you have purchased from in the past. I have one in New York and one in LA that I like as well. And so I think you and I have had experience with multiple and various ADs, and it operates very differently than any of these brands who control their retail. Like an AP where you go to the AP house or a boutique. Right. And of course we talked about sort of these micro brands having direct to consumer businesses. But the Rolex AD game and sort of model is unique. And everyone has a different story and a different sort of buying pattern to get certain watches. So tell me a little bit about your experience.
Yeah. I've probably taken a little bit more of, I'll call it a bit more of a traditional path. Meaning that to get some of the watches that I've managed to acquire, I've done so very thoughtfully in terms of just the pieces that I've gotten along the way, knowing that purchase history is important. People have heard that ad nauseum, but also thinking about the types of watches that I've purchased, the case materials, just trying to vary between tool and sport watches and, sort of ladies' watches and, things from the catalog that were more or less desirable, but in all cases, things that I wanted that fit needs. But, my watch journey has definitely been one of trying to purchase watches with intention and with enough variance all along the way to be able to attain some of the more desirable pieces like the Panda Daytona, like the GMT, and so on. But that was accomplished, I'd say, from making sure that I was definitely purchasing watches that kind of checked boxes where you could look at the entirety of the purchase history and say, like, okay, this was done in a way where the next watch, it is appropriate to be something that is something more, again, desirable from the catalog. I've purchased women's watches, the OP for my father, a day date, obviously in precious metal, the GMT and so on. So it's been a bit all over the place, but always with, intention. And again, knowing that these were things that I actually wanted and filled needs for me.
Well, that's actually great because a lot of people get sort of pressured into buying stuff they don't want to buy prior to getting the piece they want, right? And 80s have become incredibly sort of overt about it. And they'll say things like, luckily for us, like where we go, they don't sell jewelry, but you hear a lot of stories about men just buying a ton of jewelry that, neither they need nor their wives need or want at the time, but they will purchase a level of, say, let's $50,000, $60,000 to get allocated a Rolex watch. Now, obviously Rolex doesn't condone doing this, but because of their model, they don't really have control over what the hell the people that are selling their watches can do, right? And how they interact with their customers, which is really strange for a brand like Rolex that cares so much about every little detail. They've really let the retail experience kind of go to hell, having no control over it. My experience has been a little bit different than yours, I would say, even at the same, even though we're talking about it at the same AD. I think I just have a different philosophy when I go in. I really don't like to buy watches that I don't need. And it sounds like you haven't needed to do that either, which is great. My RAD always tells me that, oh, you always like the specialty pieces. Implying that I should just go buy some dogs in the catalog to make my, which is absurd, right? And I'll go in and I'll tell her what I want and what I like, and I'm someone who's somewhat knowledgeable about it, right? So I'm not like calling them by their nicknames. I'm not, I'm clearly showing an interest in not only the brand but the pieces themselves, and we talk for hours. She's wonderful and like super nice person, but at the same time, I feel like we've reached a point now where, we both have pretty similar purchase histories there. And I feel like I've kind of peaked. I always thought it gets easier as you have more of a purchase history.
I did too.
But now every time I go in and talk to her about, what's on my list, she just kind of like shakes her head being like, ugh, man, are you sure? Like, is there a woman in your life you would just buy a watch for? Like, and then she'll like pull out some like disgusting, like completely pave dial, I don't know if it was a date just or a date 8, something I would never wear, or something a woman in my life would never wear. And she's just trying to kind of push it on me. And I'm like, I thought we were past that. I've known you for like 3 years now or whatever it is. It seems a bit, disingenuous, and I don't actually know how I get any watch I want now. Like now, after getting the Panda, which she always throws in my face, she's like, "Well, I got you that Panda, so now we really have to work on some different pieces before we talk about either a Daytona or a Land Dweller or whatever." So I don't really know where to go there.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I was just saying earlier that I feel stuck in the same way. But the watches that I want now fall probably into that specialty watch category. I'm feeling a bit stuck at the moment and trying to figure out what to do. So, we'll see what happens. Stay tuned. I'm sure there'll be some updates in the foreseeable future there. But I agree with you. I think we're both kind of at a stage where it feels like we're a bit in neutral.
But what's, I think what also is important for people to understand is that this is a pretty popular boutique in the middle of New York City. And there's a ton of celebrities that shop there, and like big time celebrities that even like close down half the boutique to pick up their watch and things like that. And so that's kind of what we're up against. So we're climbing up a steep hill here, and they shouldn't make you feel like you're less than all those others, right? That come in that they want wearing their watches, and that's where the allocations go. But that's really the truth, and like, so no matter what the purchase history we have collectively, it pales in comparison to the level of celebrity that walks in there, and not necessarily their purchase history, just that they are a celebrity, and that sort of trumps any kind of purchase history.
Yeah, one thing that I do want to double down on that you said earlier, which is I always did think it would get easier. I thought that at some point, just given purchase history, you would get to this stage where you would suddenly be offered, kind of these specialty watches with more regularity. But to get to the point that we're at, and to understand now that we're still sort of playing by the same rules of like maybe getting something that's a little bit less desirable in the catalog to get something that is more desirable in the catalog. I did think it was going to get easier, and it really hasn't.
Totally. And it's important to note that not all ADs are created equally. And so, nothing's the same. So some of the rumors you'll hear about like what the exact purchase history you need to get a Daytona, or that all fluctuates and differs between the different ADs you go to. And so, for example, while I've been building this relationship in New York, I do travel to LA quite a bit for work. And one day I just randomly stopped in. I was helping someone find a Wimbledon Datejust, which is a pretty, I guess, difficult watch to get allocated in the Datejust world. And we were able to do it at this. I'll just say the name at the Geary's Rolex in LA, and it was in Santa Monica. And spoke to this awesome guy for like half an hour. Told him the situation, what we were trying to source, and he said, I'll be completely honest with you. I have that watch, but it's been allocated to someone. This client is a bit flaky and has been in the past. So like she has 24 hours to pick it up. If you're still in LA tomorrow, I can call you if she happens to not come in to pick it up or answer our texts. I didn't think much of it. I thought it was nice of him to say that, but I didn't know him from Adam. So like, I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, here's the number. Like, feel free to text me. And then the next day at noon, he goes, can you be in the next hour? Because we're ready for you. And she never came to pick it up. So that, okay, great. He was super honest. Didn't really care that we didn't have like a long-standing relationship. Didn't care that I didn't live in LA, which is a big thing for ADs. They like to sell to locals. Right. And then I started really building a relationship with him because, I thought that was such a great experience that every time I was back in LA, I would go say hi to him. And literally, I think the third time I walked into that boutique. So not the time after the Wimbledon date just, but the time after that, I was talking to him about how much I love Daytonas and, particularly like certain models. And he said, you would buy any Daytona if I brought something out. And I was like, well, I probably wouldn't buy a two-tone. And he goes, no, but you'd buy, he's like, you like precious metal? And I'm sitting there being like, oh my God, is this guy about to give me a John Mayer? Because it hadn't been discontinued at that point yet. But he comes out with a white gold Daytona with the sort of tone-on-tone dial. It's like that silver dial. Black subdials, really just awesome watch. I could not believe it. My jaw hit the ground, right? I mean, like, again, I haven't known this guy for so long. Who the hell allocates Daytonas to someone they've met 3 times? And I just, we just really got along. He really saw how much I loved the brand and particularly the Daytona models and sort of my knowledge on the history of it and all. And there it was. I walked out of the boutique that day with that Daytona. Which is a crazy experience that I don't think I can go replicate elsewhere. Yeah, so that's why I think it's important to like try out your ADs. Go to different ones and see who's really being honest with you. Yeah,
I think you've highlighted a few points that I think are pretty mission critical for anyone that wants to get not only a Rolex but anything that is a bit more sort of hyped or difficult to obtain, just given some scarcity, but. Number one is you have to develop a rapport with your AD. You sit down, you talk to them. You talked about talking to him for hours, right? So you've got to develop that rapport. I think secondarily, it's about consistency. You've got to go back. You said you make it a point to either reach out or to visit every time you're in LA, and I think that's important just to develop. That FaceTime and the consistency of just making sure that you're giving people a shout from time 100%. To time, and that they remember you and know who you are. And the third thing is just know something about the watches when you're going in there and you're having conversation, just to speak about the references and the history. And, you said you don't refer to Rolexes by their nicknames, which is so easy to do. And we do it all the time because it's shorthand. We say Pepsi, we say Bruce Wayne, we say, Pikachu and John Mayer and so on, but those are not the terms that ADs typically use. And so when you go in there, try to refrain from doing that. I think those are some keys. And maybe it's something we dig into a bit more in a later episode. But I know, just knowing you personally, I know that some of our listeners who know you personally are aware that you're exceptionally good at doing those things. And I think maybe there's an opportunity to interview you a bit more and get more granular about, how you approach these things. But I think you've highlighted 2 or 3 things there that are, I think, absolutely critical if it's something that you want to try to get at retail.
You want me to give away my secrets, Gene?
Yes.
But I'll be honest, there's no secret sauce, man. There's no. I think it's super important to just go in and be yourself. Like you can't. And that's such a cliche thing to say, but and if they don't like you, then move on and go to someone else, and find someone that you do connect with. Because ultimately, it's ridiculous that we're even having this conversation. And if someone's not a watch person and they happen to listen to this, they're probably like mind blown that there is even strategy to sort of going in and purchasing a luxury item. So yes, let's just establish a baseline here that this is all ridiculous. And I know there are a ton of people out there who, just hate the fact that this is the way it is, but sadly, this is the way it is. But really, it's like you're building a relationship, and they use that word and that term for a reason, because that's what it is. Basically, what happens at ADs is that there's a bunch of sales associates that are fighting for their clients. And what I mean by that is when when a land dweller will come in to our AD, right? They will basically, like, the manager of that boutique will say, okay, we got in one land dweller and we don't expect to get one for another couple of months. The sales associates will be like, well, no, wait, but my client, deserves it because of XYZ. And if that sales associate knows nothing about you other than that you want that watch, I can guarantee you're not getting allocated that watch, right? I'm not saying you have to go in with some sob story about your life and why this is like the only thing that'll make you, happy, and that you've been diagnosed with some rare disease and this is your last, wish on earth. But just being genuine and sort of telling your story a little more deeply than, hey, take my money, I want this watch.
Yeah, I mean, you have to you have to arm them with the right narrative in order to make sure that when they're in that room and they're in that space, to be able to say, like, hey, Mo is the right person for this watch. You need to give them enough information to accomplish that goal. So completely agree with you. Be genuine. I think most sales associates can kind of sniff out when someone isn't being genuine. So try not to fake it too hard. But yeah, all of those things, completely agree with you.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say on it, because what you just said reminded me of it, is that, when you said that they're trying to sniff out who's not genuine, what they're trying to sniff out is like who's going in there to ultimately flip that watch.
Yeah.
They don't want that as much as like there's all these conspiracy theories that, most of the flips out there are ADs themselves flipping the watches behind the scenes, whether it's through a sort of backdoor transaction or whatever. That may be true, and I'm not commenting on that. But what I am saying is that a lot of people, and the ADs in particular, know that they're basically handing you money when they sell you a watch, right? Like if you are able to go buy a steel Daytona, for example, at retail, you're paying the $16,000 or $15,500 or whatever it is, and you're walking out with an extra $15,000. Like if you were to just go sell that watch that day, you make a quick $15K. So they know this, you know this going in, and your job while you're sort of pitching them on why you deserve this piece is to not, overtly say it or not be so, transactional about it, but make them believe that you are not looking for that cash in your hand.
Right.
You are looking to enjoy this piece for a long time, if not forever.
Completely agree.
Gene, before we head off here, you had told me recently that a friend of yours, and I'll let you tell the story, but basically kind of asked you about a first watch purchase and gave you a budget. Yeah. Why don't you tee it up, and then maybe we can talk about it a little bit, and hopefully some of our listeners can contact us with what their thoughts are on it.
I have a colleague that I work with, and he I think was in conversation or was, he had met up with a friend of his. And again, we're talking about the music industry here, and his friend was wearing a Tudor Pelagos. And my colleague has never necessarily been a watch person. I think he wears a watch from time to time, an Apple Watch, your favorite, Mo. But, nothing in sort of the mechanical realm or sphere. So what he asked me the other day is, just because he became so enamored with the Pelagos, was, what were some alternatives that he could potentially purchase as his first, kind of real like luxury watch. He gave me a budget of $3K, meaning that, he didn't want to deviate too far from there, plus or minus. But was looking for some suggestions. If I can give you a little bit of background for him, he's a music supervisor. He is very, very much into collecting, kind of vinyl, musical instruments, that kind of thing, which immediately sort of makes me think vintage, possibly, or something that has like some vintage like qualities to it. But not married to that. Again, he fell in love with the Pelagos, so not sort of vintage in the traditional sense, although it does take some cues from some vintage watches. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the foundation, the table setting there. Do you have any immediate ideas that come off the top of your head?
So I think I don't mean to sound snobby, but just thinking about this pretty quickly, like the $3K budget is tough. Like if it was $5, I'd have like a ton of suggestions. One thing I would say, if he doesn't care about secondary market, I think the Black Bay 58 can be had for like $2,900, on the secondary. I think that's awesome because it scratches the itch of what he kind of saw in the Pelagos, but also this idea that you've identified of the vintage aesthetic. There's certainly more sort of guilt on that
Right.
that I think would really resonate with him. And if he does really care about buying something new and not secondary, because as you mentioned, if you're not a watch person, like sometimes it can be straight, like, why am I buying something used? Like, no, I want something of my own, and so where I'd tell him to go and kind of explore the catalog a bit is Longines. Like, I think Longines literally owns this category of watch, like in this price range. I think their catalog from dress to sport is built for someone with a $3K budget.
Yeah, I agree with you. I wish he could come up to 5, but obviously 3 or 5 is a lot of money, sort of objectively. So stay within your budget. We've talked about that a lot. So yeah, I think Longines is a great kind of example. Staying in the Tudor family on the secondary market makes a ton of sense.
And just on Longines before you continue.
Yeah.
Just because he liked the Pelagos and it's a little different, but the Spirit Zulu time in the Longines catalog is an awesome watch. Like, packs a ton of punch. I think it's 3,300 retail, certainly less on the secondary, but it is stainless steel, ceramic bezel, awesome watch, like aesthetically and of course internally, like in the movement. Everything about it is great. They have a ton of different versions. They have a 39 millimeter. They have a 42 millimeter.
As we've said before, a big Hamilton fan, and so that's something that probably fits his price point, and he can save a little bit of money there. But yeah, there's a bunch. I've got to give it more thought. But to our listeners, if you've got any suggestions that kind of fit that price point that you think would be great, given what I've mentioned about his background and that additional context, by all means, please give us those suggestions in the comments or reach out to us directly, and I will have an update soon about whatever he decides to go with.
Well, that was a jam-packed episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And Gene, if there's nothing else, we'll see you next time on the Dialed In Pod.
See you next time.